Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I'm super excited because I am welcoming back my lovely original co-host, Lisa Bolton, today. Lisa! Yay!
Hello! It's so good to talk to you again.
I am so happy to have you.
Talked
I know.
It's nice to talk in this medium. I love it.
It is. I'm so excited to have you back. When this episode goes live, it will be episode number 52, which will mark a full 52 weeks of podcasts. So
a whole year. In an unprecedented year. Wow.
Yes. So I am super excited. I'm also really excited about what we're going to be talking about today, because today we're going to be getting a little bit into mindset, and we're going to be talking about visualizing success. But I want to talk about it with a caveat, because I know that sometimes, and some of the things we're going to be talking about can be a little bit, little woo-woo, maybe not so rooted in, maybe a little bit out there, not so definitive. But I think that's part of what mindset is sometimes. I think it is a little bit woo-woo. But at the same time, I want to make it clear that when we're talking about visualizing success, it doesn't mean we're not talking about doing the hard work to make that success happen. So I think the best way to think about it is, if you think about like a professional athlete, somebody who is performing at a very high level, most of them work with sports psychologists to help with visualization. So it could be visualizing themselves on a podium, it could be visualizing themselves crossing a finish line, all very a lot of mental work that goes in. But that doesn't mean that athlete gets to sit on the couch and eat Doritos every day. Doesn't mean they don't have to train and practice. Like, they still have to put in the hard work, but they're recognizing that there is a step beyond just the physical hard work that also has to be done. There's the mental work that needs to happen.
And, I think I have a 10-year-old, and I think there's no better example than watching him right now, because the 10-year-old still is an imaginary, they have such a beautiful imaginary mind. And he's a big baseball player, and I can hear him when he's playing with his baseball saying that, like, strike three, and you're the win the championship, and
crowd goes wild.
Really. And then the next day he's at practice working really hard, but he doesn't second guess himself or feel woo-wooey or squishy about that visualization. It comes natural to them. They're just like, he's just lost in his world, and it's like the true, like, earliest forms of visualization, I think, and manifesting that to happen, because that's what he wants to happen. He wants to be in that scenario at the bottom of the ninth with, 2 outs and bases loaded, and he's up, and like, that's the dream, to experience that. And yet I sometimes think as we get older, we don't make space and time for that, because you really have to make that time to, with everything you have going on in your day and all the hard work and the very tangible, specific activities to manifest that goal. Sometimes I think we're very quick to push back and push down the time for quiet, visualization or meditation or journaling and those sorts of things that have proven true connectors to achieving those goals.
Yeah, and you bring up something else that's really interesting, is that visualization when you're a kid, that comes from a place of play. Like, he's playing. He's playing, he's imagining. It's all, to him, it's just play. He's not sitting there going, I'm going to visualize my success at being a baseball player.
It's very organic. Very, yes, not planned. It's very spontaneous. Yes, exactly.
And as adults, we're not good at that. We're not good at just playing without planning playtime, without playing being things like, oh, I'm going to go on a vacation or something. So that's really interesting that it kind of comes out of that place of, I'm just going to play by myself with my ball in the
Yep.
backyard.
Exactly. And I am really truly visualizing what I want to see happen one day. Like
Hmm.
that is true. Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder where it is that we sort of forget that step.
I don't know. Yeah, I think I think as you go through those years where self-doubt starts to maybe creep
Yeah.
in a little bit, self-consciousness, like those sorts of things, I think unfortunately can push down some of that organic play that comes out.
Yeah. Interesting to
Yeah.
think about. I never really thought about that before, but at some point we definitely seem to walk away from that step. I don't know where that
Mhm.
happens.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. What do you like? So how do you, have you got some that you've done in the past that you
Yeah,
like?
so the big one for me that I had on my list that actually worked for me, and I didn't realize it at the time, and I think I might have told you about this eons ago, but this came out of a breakup. Actually, I love to write, and I decided I was really angry at the person involved, and I decided I was going to write a private detective mystery novel, which is something I've always wanted to do. It's still on my bucket list, and it was going to be kind of about him, and it gets a little bit dark here, but he was going to be the person that was murdered, and the private detective was going to have to figure out who did it and everything. And the private eye was basically a much savvier, sassier, outgoing, cooler version of myself. Anyway, I wrote a chapter and a half. That was it. I got all my anger out. I was done.
Perfect.
But what I didn't realize until several years later, when I went back to read that chapter and a half, I found it on my hard drive, is that the version of myself that I had projected into this character, a lot of the things about her that I didn't have at the time, but that I wanted, that I had given her, had come to pass in my real life. And it was, I don't think I would have realized it after going back,
Hmm.
if I hadn't gone back after a couple of years and just had that time lapse in between. But it was really shocking to me. Like, suddenly I had my own business like she did. I even had a dog, a yellow lab named Sam, which I had given her in the book. I had totally forgotten about that. And
Before you had Sam, like
before
you'd
I had
written.
Sam, I wrote this probably
Wow.
a good 5 years before I had Sam. So it was really interesting to me how somehow putting that all onto paper
Hmm.
had helped manifest it in my life subconsciously. I wasn't sitting there thinking about this character that I had created, and I abandoned her after a chapter and a half. So it wasn't like she was, a
Yeah.
really deep fixture in my head. And that got me to thinking as I was kind of prepping for this episode, because one of the things on my list is journaling, but I don't know if that would have come out of journaling. I think for me, the fact that I felt like I was writing fiction
Hmm.
is what helped that process, and we can get into that in a little bit. But yeah, that sort of was my first lesson in how powerful that process can be, even when you don't necessarily realize that you've done it.
Yeah, I've never, this is really interesting, and I've never heard of a like journaling into a fiction outlet as a way of manifesting, your success or ideas or dreams. Like that is actually, I feel like that could be something really interesting to explore, even to help um, people with templates or ideas of way to comes out with it. But I've never thought of that. But think of the freedom, because I find I'm a very reluctant journaler. I find it
Mm-hmm.
tough to be completely vulnerable and open on paper and stuff. However, if you asked me to write a character, I would feel like a lot of those inhibitions would probably go away, because now I'm not writing it about myself, quote unquote, even if I, somehow was. Like I do think that opens up a lot of freedom and takes away a lot of fears.
I think it definitely did for me. I'm always much more comfortable writing fiction than I am about writing about myself
Mm.
in my journal. I feel like sometimes when I write in my journal, I get too precious.
Ah,
Like, I don't
yeah.
know. And I really do not like going back and reading old journal entries. Whereas a piece of fiction that I've written, I will go back and look at it on my hard drive and see if there's
Yeah.
something I can do with it. So if I had done all of that in a journal, the odds are I probably wouldn't the journal would have probably been filled with a lot of anger. Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have channeled it into something better, like a better version of me. I would have just been venting. And 2 years down the road, I would never have gone back and looked at it. It would have just been a journal on a shelf somewhere. So
So would you ever finish this piece of, like, do you feel like this is a piece of writing, like, that is like it was for a point in time and it sits in a box now, or would opening it like be therapeutic or helpful or inspiring or not? Like,
I don't think it would be therapeutic at this point. I mean, what I was writing about is long finished and everything. But I liked the character that I created, and I could see myself, if I ever do sit down to write my big novel, I could see myself taking that out and potentially taking bits of it and using it, but it wouldn't be with the thought behind it that I was working through something.
no, right.
And I knew when I wrote it, when I started writing it, that this was my way of working through this. Like, I was just angry at him, and I just wanted to get all that anger out into some kind of outlet. And this is just the outlet that I was very comfortable with at the time. And once the anger was gone, the story kind of, like, I just, the wind went out of my sails. I didn't need to write it anymore. So I thought that was interesting, because I also have Miss Doodle, my little art character, and she is also just an alter ego of me. And when I was writing out my list of things to talk about today, I sort of realized, like, you can also visualize and manifest things through art, which I had never considered before this morning.
But that's exactly what your art is for you, right?
Yeah.
Like, that really is how I mean, she's a perfect example.
And I think that's the case. I think probably if you asked most fiction writers, a lot of what they write about comes from within, right? It's not necessarily to help them visualize success. That's not why I did it. But it was just interesting that was kind of, looking back on it several years later, that is unintentionally what I had done. I had written the person I wanted to be, but I wasn't there yet. And so it was a very eye-opening experience for me, definitely.
There's definitely a hand to brain connection, I believe in.
Totally.
And I think that's the overarching theme of a lot of this, getting, visualizing your success and how you get there is, and whether that's with the written word or art, I think is really, really cool. Like, I think it's just how it is in that moment. And I think a person could be drawn to one or other, or, like someone like yourself who kind of floats between the two too. Like, you find different ways. And sometimes that hand to brain connection is coming out in a more artistic way.
Yeah, definitely. What about you? Have you had, like, anything that you have found, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that has been a way of visualizing success that later came?
I mean, I think definitely journaling is something, and I think I get very intimidated by journaling and what it's supposed to be. Like, I think I fell into that. Like, it didn't come natural for me. And then I felt like, okay, is this a diary where I have to be like all of my deepest thoughts, or is this just gratitude and I can only say these things, or is this like the beautiful art journals that people are doing and mine's in not a nice notebook? And so I think I kept running into a lot of roadblocks as to, I knew that I'd read so much, and the benefits of journaling, in quotes, was so beneficial in so many aspects of life. But I was really struggling with that it had to look and fall into a certain type of journaling.
Yeah.
And when I let go a lot of that and realized that it was just the act of unedited writing that was what worked best for me. And when I started writing my book, that was really when I spent time in that space of not it having to be perfect. I didn't have the perfect pen and the perfect flow of everything. It wasn't about how it looked. It was merely let your brain just write the thoughts down, and you said something key, you don't have to go back and reread it. Because I felt like that actually also didn't help me. Going back to reread it, I didn't like it because it wasn't, I don't know, edited well, or it wasn't perfect in the thing. But really letting go of what it had to look like, how it was edited, and that it was just unfiltered feelings of that day. So some days it was very gratitude. Some days it was a reflection of, well, I was working toward this particular goal, and this is some success I shared in it yesterday or whatnot. And then sometimes it was, sharing a frustration of like, I wasn't happy with the way I handled myself, or like, so I just felt that with leaving it a little bit open and really just focused on getting the words out and documenting them meant I didn't hold on to them. It freed up brain space for
Mm-hmm.
me to focus on what I needed to do tomorrow or the next day, or in the task at hand. But when I didn't have that outlet and I wasn't getting rid of those thoughts, it would bog me down and it would really impact my focus. So when I was trying to get into something, I would be like, pew, 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 things coming back at me. And God, you really didn't do that well yesterday. Or like, oh, wasn't yesterday great? Or like, it was a release mechanism. And that I find, was super helpful as trying to move it forward.
That is really interesting because what you described is exactly what if you do the Artist's Way program that Julia Cameron has, her morning
Hmm.
pages, that is exactly what the purpose of them is. It is just stream of thought
Yes,
writing for
that's the
three
word.
pages.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're done, you put the pages in an envelope and you don't look at them again. Like, and
Yeah.
the whole point of it, in the way she describes it, is you are emptying all the crap out of your brain for the day so you can get on with what you need to do. So you've just discovered it on your own, but that's
Hmm.
essentially what you're doing, is just freeing up all that mental space, which is a lot of what visualization is about. It's creating space for the important things to come in. And it's really fascinating to me how our brains work on so many different levels when we're not even aware. Like, our brain is working away on problems while you and I are having this conversation. Your
Hmm.
brain's working on some problem. You're not even aware it's happening. Same's happening with me.
Yep.
And they're just chugging away in the background. It's like computer processes that are calculating things in the background while you're tapping away on Google.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of engines, a lot of cogs turning when you think you're even when you think you're hyper focused on something. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why visualization, I think, can be so beneficial, because it's a subconscious process that you're putting in motion that's working in the background while you're
Hmm.
doing the daily tasks to get that stuff done.
The consistency is a big part of that. Like, you're not going to feel the results, or I think see them after one or two times. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
making a commitment to some form of, again, like hand to brain practice, with the purpose of visualization, or with a goal in mind. You need to put that in play. 30 days behind you and you'll see something, but it's really being consistent with it, I think,
Yeah.
and carving out time in your day for that practice. I find for me, like, as much as I'm a morning person and I like to have that routine in the morning, I like the visualization at nighttime. So the morning pages, like the Artist Way, I do enjoy for like, okay, I just need to reflect on the day yesterday and what happened. And I feel like that's a really nice time to get a lot of stuff out. Night, I find, is for real, like, positive visualization. Like, creating yourself a nightly routine is, I think, can be a really helpful habit when it comes to thinking about those things.
See, I'm totally the opposite. I always did my morning pages before bed so I could get all the crap. It
Oh,
gets
at
the
the end
crap
of
out
the
of my
day. Yeah.
head so I can go
Yeah.
to sleep.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I can see that too. Yeah.
So I don't sit there worrying about what I said, or like
Yeah.
how I did something. It's just like, it's done. It's time for bed. And then in the morning, I tend to do the whole. That's when I sit down with
Oh,
my journal or my planner, and I write down my intentions for the day and what I'm
yeah.
grateful for, and all that stuff. But I think the idea, like you said, is the routine of it.
The routine. I
Yeah.
think routine is committing to that time that becomes sacred. Other things can wait. I think it pays exponentially down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah,
agree.
for sure.
And there's
Yeah.
definitely something to the hand to eye to mind
Hmm.
connection that goes on there. I think there's something really powerful about just the act of writing not typing, but actually writing things down, which is why, I mean, I use Asana, which is a project management platform. That's how I organize my day. That's how I organize my projects. I have everything in there. But I still have a paper planner that I use every day that I write things down in with a pen.
Yeah.
Because there's just something about that process that is equal parts soothing to me. Like, I find it very soothing to write with a pen. I just, not long, epic things, but just writing a list is very soothing to me with a cup of tea. And that's where I kind of like reinforce what I'm going to do for the day. I have it on my screen. It tells me what I'm going to do today, but by writing it down, it just reinforces it in my head. And that for me is a big part of the whole visualization process for me. Like, I need to see it, I need to write it, and I need to think it. I think are the things that sort of, I need that trifecta.
You know what I did? You gave me the most adorable pencil case holder with little trailers on it one year from a craft show we attended. And that sits on my trolley. And it was I don't know, a few months ago, I invested in some like nice pens, not even expensive pens, just like pens for me. They're not the pens that everyone else gets to use in the house. Like my pens, I have some like pretty stickers and like a little ruler and a little notebook, and it's in that pencil case holder, and it just sits there. And that's like, I love that. I start my day, I go into that, like I unzip it, I go in, I bring out my little dot, it's a little mini dot journal that I love, and my pretty pens, and that's where I like do exactly that. I write my to-do list for the day, just kind of set it up. There's a routine to it. I'm having my morning coffee and having that special, and then it goes back in the thing, gets zipped up at night. It's always there, like creating that repetition that it's very easy. There's nothing frantic about it, is very soothing. Yeah. And whatever I end up doing or not doing, if I accomplish the things or I don't, it's really not the matter. It's like drawing the nice little square, writing it out neatly, and I don't know. It's a nice habit.
It is, and at the same time, you're reinforcing those things that are important to you to get done to achieve those bigger goals. Yeah. So it's all part of the visualization process. And I think this is the thing I was trying to allude to right at the beginning, is that we all need to have goals. We all need to visualize those goals. And those goals can be anything. It could be becoming a 7-figure business. It could be going on a trip to Borneo. It could be, like whatever your goal is. And it's all really nice. I can sit here in my chair and imagine the trip to Borneo, which is a huge part of it, right? Yeah. Like you want to sit there and you want to think about the places you'll go, and you want to imagine what it'll be like getting on the plane and packing and all that stuff. That's part of the visualization process. But at the same time, I'm never going to go on that trip unless I like go onto the internet and book a plane ticket. Yeah. Right? Like there's steps that are involved to achieve that thing that you're thinking about, that you're visualizing. And that's where that whole writing, drawing, whatever it is that you need to do to reinforce those steps in your head have to come. I can't remember where I was going with that, but anyway.
No, I understand what you're saying though. And I think having it front of mind, and also, how often do people say the time just flies? Where did the month go? I got, I've had especially in this last year, I've had time pass where I'm like, I don't feel like I produced it. Like there's no fruits to my labor over the last week, or there's like been times where time has passed and I don't feel like I've moved forward, that I've just maintained. I'm like, I've just kept up the bare essentials. And I think having it front and center, to your point, like having that visual in front of you, knowing that if it's hard to ignore, if it's something you look at and see every day, even if it's something that it's far off in the future, but it pops into your head. My mom told me this story, and so she's in her she's late 60s, and she told me back in the 80s she remembers getting, and I know we'll touch on vision boards, but she remembers putting, I don't even know if it was called a vision board back in the 80s, but she was making a vision board. She had 2 young children. She was to go old-fashioned way, glue stick and old magazines. So she's flipping through the magazines, and she saw 2 I always have to think before I say the word Adirondack chairs.
Yeah, I think that's right.
on a deck on a lake, and she said that just was like, I want that one day. I want two wooden Adirondack chairs on a dock looking at a lake one day, and she said it was, I remember specifically cutting it out, gluing it down on this vision board, cardboard thing she was doing. The vision board long got recycled and never made it through all the moves we did. But, fast forward to her being in her early 60s, and, they bought the cabin on the lake with the Adirondack chairs. And she says, like, I'd never thought about that vision board or that picture for 40 or 20, 30 years. I never thought about it. But then all of a sudden, like one day she said, I'm looking out, out my kitchen window down at my dock and see my chairs. And I thought, I did that. And that, so sometimes these things, you don't know when in life they're going to come. And it not that she made certain choices, and that was always it, but it was about, it can just be a spark that starts, and it may take years to manifest, but just making that, it's no coincidence. It's no, like, I do believe that there's a reason those things happen, those things that catch your eye that are important to you at different aspects in your life. It may kind of take the long road to get there, but if they're truly important and they resonate with you, they can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I very firmly believe that. I think it was something that I've always struggled with things that are a little bit, like, as we say, woo-woo.
Yes.
That's just not my personality. But after going through that whole exercise of trying to write a detective novel
and ending up with a yellow lab named Sam
and rereading it, I was just like, holy crap, my brain did that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Without me really having to, I mean, obviously things had to happen for all of that to come to fruition, and there was a lot of hard work involved, not so much with getting Sam, but with starting a business and things like that. But I had put it out there into the world, and I think that's really a key part of it. I did it in a place where I couldn't see it, but I have done it in ways where I can see it, and that's where I think something like a vision board can be really useful. It's there. Put it somewhere where you can see it. And I don't think you have to get precious about creating a vision board. It doesn't have to be complete, when you put it up on the wall, because things change, life changes, your things are going to come along that you want to add to it, and it can be a work in progress. But having it somewhere that you see it every day, whether it's the first thing you see or whether it's in your workspace where you can constantly kind of see it out of the corner of your eye in your peripheral vision or something like that, it's reinforcement to your brain, like that these are the things that you've decided are important to you and that you want to have. It doesn't have to be a work of art.
No, I think there's a few different ways to do them as well. Like I like the idea of it being like a cork board or a magnet board or something that can change, because I think sometimes, it should be fluid. I think the idea of like gluing down this picture and this is what I want sometimes makes it almost like, well, now it can't be changed. And I like the idea of something where I'm pinning up different, whether it's words or images, or just things that that I know I want to be a part of my future. But that might change, and I know that the things I wanted in my 20s or I thought maybe were important, there's some that have stayed the same, and there's some that I've let go of. And I think having something that's a little bit fluid and flexible will give you the courage to put it up there, knowing it can be changed, and give you the permission to change it if it no longer serves you in the way that maybe you thought it would.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. The board that I have next to my computer is a cork board, and I move stuff on and off of it all the time. And there's things that have been there literally for decades, and there's things that get chucked after a month, or you can change it up. It's perfectly okay to change.
It's like trying it on, right? I feel like I want to try this on and see if this fits me, and maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't, but over time you'll know it's so, and you'll feel it. I think there's a couple things with vision boards that I would caution, well, two things. One, I would caution people on, and what I would encourage people on. The cautionary tale would be if you are looking at images that are online or in magazines or from, things in print, to caution people that those images have been retouched and brightened and clear. And so whether it's a physical picture or like the water's bluer than it might be, or I don't know, the smile is whiter than it normally is in real life. But those images, that they be aspirational, but to just make sure that you're not setting yourself up for something that doesn't, I don't know, am I saying this right? Like doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
beware of perfection.
Yes.
Perfection does not
Yes.
exist. So
Exactly. Or even in the art you do, or like if there's an artist that just any of that, it is meant to be inspirational and not hold you to a
yeah.
standard that may just not be achievable in
Yep.
real life.
I think maybe a way to think about it is think about the feeling that it brings
Yes.
in you. So, like when your mom cut out that picture
Yes.
of the dock and the lake and the Adirondack chairs, she wanted all of those things. But I'm sure the reason she wanted them is because they sparked a feeling in
Yes.
her. There was something about that. Maybe it was just the idea of being near stillness and calm
Wow.
and enjoying it,
Yeah.
or maybe it was the thought of like watching her grandkids jump off the dock,
Yeah.
and having fun. Or
It wasn't about the chairs per se.
yeah, not so much
was
about
the
the chairs,
feeling
it's
it
about
evoked.
the feeling that she evoked, and she wanted that feeling to come to fruition. And I think that's a good way to think about visualizing it. Like, for your business, you might be visualizing that you want to hit 500,000 in sales this year. That's a really ambitious goal. But, you could hit 490,000 or even 400,000, and that could be great. But I think part of what you're visualizing there is the fact that you're visualizing your business moving forward. You're visualizing financial stability. You're visualizing a lot of like feelings around that number. It's not so much that you have to hit 500,000 exactly in sales.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to kind of think about it, but also give yourself permission to not get wrapped up in the perfection or the success fail ratio of your vision.
I experienced that a lot with my book. Like I really feel like, I went through, I think for me, because when I got the book deal, it was a very tangible item. So it was something that I knew had.
Yeah.
The contract was like,
sign on the
okay, this was going to happen. And I embarrassingly to say even here. So had Oprah's going to have it on her. She's going to have it on her list. I know it. And it's going to be this. And like, I had all those dreams. I allowed myself to just get carried away with, what this was going to be. I had a sales goal in mind, a number of copies I wanted to sell. I wrote it on a sticky note, put it right in front of me, where I went to work every day, and I looked at that number. And so I went through various stages of visualizing success, very tangible things and very grandiose things. And I'm so happy I did, because I achieved so many things that I didn't think were going to happen. Some things did not happen that No, Oprah. Oprah did not. I mean, I'm still holding it after she's done with,
Prince Harry.
Prince. Yeah, exactly. Then she might have time for the book. But but I never once felt disappointed. I feel like I achieved things that I had no business achieving, but I visualized them. I visualized being on national television, on live national television, and thinking, I thought, you just kind of let that float through and let it go. And then you think about it again, and it happened. And, you could point to all different reasons that it happened. And I could say, well, I had a really good publisher and a really good publicist. But I think there's also going back and saying, no, like I also worked hard. I did the work. I put in the time that was required. So I think that you can draw whatever connecting lines you want, but I really allowed myself that freedom to go very, very far out there with what I expected. And I never saw it as a failure because I didn't, get on the Oprah list. I instead just knew that I could celebrate all the other wins that I found along the way. And I'm so glad I gave myself permission to do that.
Yeah, you brought up actually something that's on my list, and that is daydreaming, which I think is very underrated. Sitting there and looking out the window and imagining the craziest things that are almost unimaginable happening, and giving yourself permission to just think about, cut to a cheesy 80s sitcom with the wavy lines as Lisa goes off into her daydream about being on the Oprah show. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Exactly. I love that. I think that's often how I end up falling asleep at night. Like I go to bed and my brain is going, and it's like, did I do this tomorrow? And don't forget, and don't do. And I find the way to calm myself is to I call it daydream at night, but I daydream a lot myself to sleep, where I'm just envisioning like, what if, and then fill in anything. And I think it just gets so obscure, my brain just gets tired and, falls asleep. But it's a really nice way to end the night too.
I do that. Okay, so I never talk about this because I feel so silly mentioning this, but I have done it since I was a little kid. And I talk to myself all the time. I have full on conversations out loud with myself, and I never talk about it because everybody's always like, oh, she's the crazy woman who talks to herself, right? Isn't that like a sign that you're crazy?
Do it at the grocery store, that I'm gonna.
So, and this is how I work through everything. Like if I am frustrated with something or with someone, I imagine the conversation I'm having with them, but I actually have it out loud. And I say the things I want to say. And I imagine that, like, if there's something I really want to happen, I imagine it happening and I talk it out loud. And I do this out loud. I do it. And actually, I've really struggled this last year because I've been stuck at home with my dad, and I don't do it around people. I only do it when I'm alone. So I've like got to the point where I'm doing it in the car when I'm on the way to buy groceries. But it's something I have done since I was a little kid. And, when you're a little kid, nobody pays attention because you're just playing, right? But once you reach a certain age, it's like, what is she doing? But it helps me work things through. It helps me not just with visualizing, but it helps me work through when I'm angry. It helps me work through when I'm nervous about a situation. Like, I can't tell you how many times I have gone through the intro to this podcast, walking around my basement, saying it over and over again, and imagining all the different ways and imagining the questions I'm going to ask somebody, because I am super... I mentioned this in a recent episode, like interviewing people terrifies me. And that for me, speaking it out loud is how I work through that terror. And I mean, like I've never talked about this out loud to anybody before, but it is really what it is it's a form of visualization for me, but it's a verbal kind of visualization that I do. And it helps tremendously. I was extremely angry about something that happened earlier this year, and I found myself carrying that anger far longer than I normally do. I have a very quick temper. I'm angry for 24 hours max, and then it's gone. But this was something that had been lingering for months, and I realized it was because I hadn't had a way to work it out. And I just, my dad went out for a walk the other day for the first time in weeks, and I wandered around the house having this imaginary conversation with the person I was angry with. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it was like this huge weight lifted off me, and the anger dissipated, and I have like put it behind me. It's done. I haven't thought about it until right now as we're having this conversation.
Like visualization wouldn't have been enough. Like you needed to get the words out in an audible way.
And that was me visualizing the end of the situation, right? Like I had to verbally do that in a way that, I didn't really have an opportunity to do or anything like it. And it was just like it dissipated. And that's when I really realized, like, wow, I need to do this for my mental health. People might think I'm crazy, but it's what stops me from being
internalizing it, right? And not being able to move on. Like I can't imagine that would probably creatively stunt you, right? It would be a block, and being able to release that, sometimes just visualizing it or saying it internally isn't enough when it's really strong.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. It was just me visualizing the end of the scenario in the way that I wanted it to go. It's not the way that it went. And the odds are I'll probably never have like actual in-person closure with that person, but I've closed it off in my head by doing that. So I don't know if there's some psychologist or psychiatrist listening, and if I'm like in danger, please let me know. But that's how I do it. I talk my way through it out loud. And so there's so many different ways that you can do this, but I've done it in the same sense that where I visualize myself being successful with something, or visualize something going really well before I go through it. And it's sort of like, it's like mentally visualizing yourself up on a podium, except I'm doing it out loud.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's whatever works, right? And
Hmm.
that might be like you did it as a way to release some anger and tension. It might be a way that somebody, or in some cases you did it to prep yourself for,
Yep.
a big project. It could just be talking through almost like your own brainstorming session. Like
Hmm.
if you're just thinking about your next project and maybe just, in a private space where you've got a whiteboard or some paper, just not just writing but saying I could do this, or maybe what would happen if, and like not being self-conscious or embarrassed to talk out loud to yourself. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, definitely. It works really well for me. And this is the thing that I hope everybody's getting from this episode is that there's so many different ways that you can do this. It doesn't have to be a vision board. It doesn't have to be a journal. It could be a journal. It could be a vision board. It could be creating art, like we talked about. One of the other ways that you can journal is through an art journal, which is
Yeah.
essentially creating art. And there's so many different ways you can do that. You can do that with paint, you can do it with markers, you can do it with collage. But it's essentially, I mean, that's really what a vision board is. It's an art
Hmm.
journal that's on a wall,
Yeah,
right?
it is. And one thing I was thinking about with the vision boards too is not being afraid to put images from your own life in it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think we have to like take other people's stuff, and maybe there's times in your life where you felt super creative or successful or just have really fond memories, again evoking that feeling no matter what you were doing. And I think even just a rough printout, even if it's in black and white, of a photo or some images, things that represent your life past. Don't be afraid to put those up on your board either. It doesn't have to be all other people's
Yeah.
words, ideas, images, right?
Yeah, like let's say that the three of you take like a vacation somewhere and
Yeah.
it's amazing and you want to capture the feeling you all had on that vacation again somewhere down the
Yes.
road, whether that is maybe moving to where you went on your vacation, or maybe it's visiting
Hmm.
there again, or it's going on more trips like that, or it's planning for a getaway home where you can all experience that feeling of togetherness or the surroundings that you were in.
Hmm.
It's a way to kind of, yeah, I'm not being articulate about this, but yeah, essentially you want to find a way to recreate something that was special to you in your life, and or maintain that feeling
Hmm.
through other events and things like that. So yes, I
Exactly.
wasn't being articulate with that, but
No, but I it's kind of the same idea, right? It's
yeah.
just that sort of, yeah, you're evoking the feeling, you're bringing back elements of whatever was happening in that moment and saying, could I apply that same thing to something, different,
Yes.
a new project or something in my future?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I also like the idea of a vision board made into a book. So,
Mm.
the idea that like I like having things up in front. So there's definitely things that I like out in the sort of that anyone who walked into the room could see it. Like I that part I like, or something that I look at every day. I also like the idea of something I can flip through and
Mm-hmm.
turn the pages of. I think about how cost effective photo labs have made it now to make little books. And we do it quite often. I'll do it for my son, like after kind of almost every summer. I've done one of like, the summer of 2020 might look a little different, but summer of 2019, and it was like highlights from, sports and vacations, and just there's a lightness to summer, I think, as a kid. And I just like, and so we put those on a shelf, and he loves like, flipping through them, and reminiscing. And I think you could do something similar even with vision boards for different projects, or maybe more specific. If you funneled something down that's a little bit more narrow and specific, putting it into, taking those images and essentially taking snapshots and putting them into a bit of a book. And maybe those books stay on your shelf so that you can, grab it and take it into your living room and sit up on the couch and curl up and flip through it and be intentional and look at it and see how things have maybe changed or not changed. And maybe it reflects a certain project or a certain point in your life, but something that has a different feel than just maybe a board does up on a wall. So a vision board doesn't have to be exactly that. It doesn't have to be a magazine cutouts on a poster board. It can look and feel a lot of different ways, essentially doing the same thing though.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why I like art journals, because you can
Yes.
flip through it and you can go back and you can see the things and you can put whatever you want. I mean, when you say art journal, art is in quotation marks. Like, let's be really clear on that. It doesn't have to be perfect drawings and sketches and beautiful watercolor representations of your deepest thoughts. It can literally just be a pencil sketch. It can literally be a cutout from a magazine. It can be whatever you want it to be. Like, it's a visual collection of ideas, I think is the best way to put it.
I feel like that's really important because as someone, and I've said this before with you too, is like, I don't identify as a creative, and someone can argue all day long, well, you clearly are because of X, Y, and Z, but I don't feel like an artist and someone who creates that. And so it can be very intimidating when if you're someone, you know, similar to I am, in that you're just exploring this world of maybe creativity or art journaling, and you start to Google that, and the biggest, best, largest accounts come up, and I've gotten lost down the rabbit hole of beautiful art journals thinking, well, I'm never going, like, mine will not look like that. And like, it can be very intimidating, and it's been a block for me in the past of like trying something, because when I go to investigate it, it's almost like I'd like to rewind 20 years ago when you had an idea for something. You would just talk to people about it. You couldn't look it up and see all the best of the best. You would just have conversations and get that knowledge that way. But now we go online to get the info and the knowledge, and it's so visual, and it is beautiful. But for someone like for myself that struggles with a bit of self-confidence in that space, it can almost be detrimental to getting started. And so I would really encourage people, when you hear the words art journaling and maybe you start to explore it, to not be discouraged, and to know that there's lots of different ways, to your point exactly, that it doesn't have to look one way.
Yeah. I'm going to give a shout out right now, actually, to a YouTuber that I watch. She is an artist based out of Toronto. Her YouTube channel is called Joy San, Joysan. And she does art journal videos a couple times a month, like real time. They're about an hour long, but her art journals are not precious in the least. And you watch her going through the whole process, and she's just like cutting bits. She cuts bits and pieces of stuff out. She, it's super chill and very approachable. Like, you watch her and you're like, oh, I could do that. Like, you realize it's, and she is an artist, but her art journals do not, I'm going to say this wrong, and it's not going to come out in the way that I mean it, but her art journals are very different from her art. Like, you can tell that her journal is very much a place where she goes to just not worry about being an artist. So, if you want to check somebody out who is not super precious about art journaling, or where it's not like these, her journals are super cute. I love watching them, but her process of going through it is very down to earth, very real, and very achievable. Like, there's nothing in there that is going to make you feel like intimidated by what she's doing. It's a very approachable way that she goes about it. And, I just recommend checking her out, even if you just want to get an idea of what an art journal could be. She does hers in a 3-ring binder. Like, it's not like a beautiful sketchbook or anything like that.
She's my people.
Yes, it's a 3-ring binder with no paper in it. And exactly. And she uses dollar store supplies, and it's just super approachable, and makes you feel very much like it's something that you could do. So she's one to check out. I'll put a link to her YouTube channel in the show notes.
Perfect. Yeah.
So another one that I'm just going to mention, because a lot of what visualization for when it comes to success is about, is making space in your world for success to come in. So I think a lot of us are very good at doing the hard work, but we have a lot of mental blocks around things. And those mental blocks can be really powerful. I think for a lot of us, money. I know for me, money is a big mental block that I have a lot of issues around. And then for other people, it could be dealing with perfection. It could be a lack of confidence. Like, there's so many things that we let get into our heads subconsciously that just mess with us. And so really what visualization, like I said, it's not about not having to do the work, but it's about creating space for success to come in. And one that I really liked, and this came from, I think this was again from Kathleen on the Being Boss podcast, where she talked about, and I can't remember what she called it, but essentially she creates a board in her office with spaces for clients. So she's creating the space for clients to come in and work with her. And she creates however many spaces she feels that she needs. So if she feels she can, 10 clients is her goal. She creates 10 spaces on this board. And every time a new client comes in, she puts up some kind of visual marker in their space to show that that space is full. And she does that until the board is full. And that's a really powerful way to, first of all, when you get that first person that you get to fill their space in, and like that's a success metric right there on your wall. Like, I didn't think I could get a client, but there's one in that space that I made. I made a space for a client and somebody filled it. And then as you start to fill the other ones, you see your success right there on the board. And it's funny how it sounds really woo-woo. And Kathleen was one of the first people to say, like, this is kind of woo-woo, but it worked for her. It was what she needed to be able to allow people in to her business instead of sitting there worrying, I'm never going to get a client. I'm not good enough, or people aren't going to find me. So that's an interesting way that you can do it from a business perspective. If you're a service-based business, I think like if you're a designer or a photographer and you're filling slots, is make those slots visible.
Yes.
Where you can see them. And
I think that's so cool because so much, especially these days, everything is on your laptop or your computer. Like it's all your clients, all your interactions with clients are digital. It's like their email files and project files and everything is so, it almost brings them to life. Like it almost,
that space represents a human, right?
I think it's really funny when I talk to you and I'm in the podcast with you and I'm writing notes down about what we're saying. Like, I think I'm like, oh, this is good. If I'm like, just a second, I want to write this down. But I really like that because it so brings them to life and makes them real and quantifies them in a way that is very uplifting and encouraging. Like, that is I have not done that or seen that before. And that's a very cool way.
Yeah. And it keeps it in front of you. And I think, like we've said, with the books, with the boards, with all these things, is that having that visual reminder, even if you don't think you're looking at it, you're looking at it. Like it's there. It's in the back of your head the whole time. So I think,
like it's like I equate it to like when you like buy a new vehicle and now all of a sudden you see them everywhere. So you've done all this research, right? And you've got your
red Honda Civics everywhere you go. All of a sudden,
everywhere you go, that's all you see. Because it's what you put the time in, you were thinking about it, you were focused about it, and now you're hypervigilant to it, right? Like you're really aware. And I think that could be very similar with this idea as well, is that, you're looking at it every day. Now suddenly you're out looking and you might identify clients or projects in places you didn't see them yesterday because you weren't doing that. So I think there's a real interesting connection there with something that is a little woo-woo, a little, but I think I can see where that would become very front of mind and very encouraging.
Yeah, you're creating the physical space for that client to fill. And if you're constantly mentally blocked around getting clients, you're never going to create the space, the open space. It's like, what they say when you end a relationship, you won't find your next relationship until you have made the mental space for a person to come in and be in a relationship with. Otherwise, you're just going to put blocks up all over the place, right? You're going to be like, I can't go out today. My hair doesn't look right, or I can't do this, or, I don't want to be on the internet, or, like you're going to put all these blocks in place. So nobody's ever going to just magically appear because you've blocked them at every entry point. But by actually creating a physical space where they can come in and be welcomed, you're bringing some of those blocks down. So it's crazy. Maybe crazy is not the right word, but it really is. There's something to it. You had another one that you were talking about before we came on the air that I had never heard of. This 369 method.
So this is another interesting one. And I think it's really interesting because everything we've talked about so far today has really been, whether you talk about the slots for clients or the journaling, we're making space. Like I feel like everything we're talking about is getting it out of your head somewhere else, so you're making room for whatever it is that goal is. So this method is called the 369 method. Apparently it's quite popular on TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, look up the 369 method, and I think there's a lot of people that are documenting theirs. But the idea is very rooted in numerology, and in general, it is taking a very specific goal, objective, or thought that you have and making time to write it down 3 times in the morning, 6 times midday, and 9 times in the evening. So, the one, it's like one sentence, but you're going to write it 3 times, 6 times, and then 9 times. So you've got a journal going. The connection to the numerology is that 3 is really a number that connects us to the universe. So that is very much what 3 kind of focuses on, is your connection to the universe, which I think when you think about creating, if sometimes you can think about it being co-creation. So you and the universe are creating. And this is very woo-woo and squishy and kind of like all over. But if you think about the fact that how much you need the world around you to work to create within, it really is a partnership. So
you hear so many artists who say that they are just kind of the vessel for like, for some people it's a religious spiritual thing. They're the vessel for God. If you're not religious or in that sense, it might just be like there's an energy force and you're just the vessel for it to get onto the page or into the world or whatever. So yes.
Or whether it's, you can't do it in a vacuum. Like you need inspiration. So whether it's nature, other people, energy, spiritual, you're absolutely right. Like you never create alone. You are always creating, co-creating with the universe. So
I love that. Co-creating with the universe.
Yeah, I think so, right?
I love it.
Yeah. And then 6 is a number that's very much associated with strength. And 9 is a number that helps us move sort of away from our past, or move through our past, and helps release self-doubt. So if you're someone who's into numerology, that sort of is the connection with the 369. The also idea around it is that it should take about 17 seconds to write some of these things down. So you're not writing huge passages, you're just writing very short pieces. But the 17-second theory is that by committing to something in writing 17 seconds a day forms a real connection with it and helps manifest its success. So just, whether you believe in this stuff or not, I can commit to 17 seconds a day. Like I can make that. And this is one I thought was really interesting because I know right back to being a kid studying for a test, I had to write things down. I would read a sentence in a textbook, and then I would write it down, and then it would stick to my brain. Like I was very much I have to rewrite this in my own words, in my own penmanship, on my paper, in my way, for it to really stick with me. And so I really connected with this because I thought it's 3 little reminders in my phone. And if I've got something, especially if it's something quite concise and specific that I really want to have, like I really see this applying, if you've got like a 6-month goal, I could see this something that, this would be a really neat method to try. You're creating repetition. Maybe you're using the same notebook or the same vessel to capture this, to be able to go back and look upon that, and that you've committed to, like, I've said this to myself over and over and over again. It's 18 times a day for that brief moment. I think it's got something to it. So it's something new that I'd heard about, and I'm intrigued to look into it more. But I like the concept in principle.
Yeah, no, and it goes back to that whole hand, brain, eye connection that we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where there is a lot of power in that. That's, like you said, when you study for tests and exams, that's one of the study techniques you learn in school, is like rewriting your notes, or pulling out the important parts from the notes and writing those down again. It's very much that whole hand-to-eye connection. And there's all kinds of studies out there that prove that, writing things, like physically writing them, not typing them on, it's the act of physically writing, which is one of the reasons I get so sad that penmanship is not a focus in school anymore, because I think there's a lot more to it than just pretty handwriting. It's a brain connection that we need to make. I am the same as you. I am actually the type of person that I remember things by where they were on a page. Like I can, that was how I would recall when I was doing tests.
I can see it. Yes.
Yeah. Like if I'd be like, I know I did this, and I'd be able to recall what side of the page I wrote it on, and was it at the top of the page or the middle or the bottom? Like that's how my brain would work in terms of recall. It's like, where was it on the page?
Yeah. I did pretty highlighters. Like I had the
Yes.
rainbow of
Yeah.
highlighters.
Did I
So
highlight
pink and
it?
green and yellow and
What did the paragraphs look like in the textbook? That kind of thing. Like that's very much how I recall things. So I think there's a lot to that. I also think sometimes that if you're writing something down that many times in a day, eventually you're going to make it happen just so you don't have to write it down anymore. Like, you know what?
That's exactly right.
Find a new
I love
client,
that.
find a new client, find a new. Eventually, you're just going to go out on Instagram or something and say, "Hey, I'm taking new clients."
So I don't have to write this 17 times a day. Yeah, no, absolutely. I do. I think there's, I mean, I think, yeah, the themes are definitely overarching here are like making space internally for new things to come in, for success to happen, getting the stuff out, getting the good stuff out and the bad stuff out, like just cycling through it and not holding on to it all internally. I love what you said about speaking it out loud. Like I do a lot of but I don't speak it out loud a lot. And I think I need to be more comfortable doing that, even if my family is home all the time, like saying I'm going into my room to talk to myself, I'm going to shut the door, and there's some things I think we shouldn't feel, gosh, like I think it's illogical to be embarrassed about that or anything. It's my own voice, right? Like it's so funny that would be a hang up, but it totally would be. And
I
yeah,
can't tell you how many times because a lot of the times it'll be like when we're doing workshops or conferences or something, and I'm staying in a hotel, and I'll be pacing, because I pace around my hotel, like while I'm doing it, I'm walking, I'm pacing around the house, and so I'll be pacing around my hotel room, but I'll be whispering because I don't want the people in the adjoining rooms to be like, who is that person talking? I mean, what are the odds? The odds are they're just going to be like, oh, that's somebody on the phone, right?
My brain is funny, right?
But I'm just like, I don't want anybody to hear me. So it's crazy. Yeah. But yes, you're absolutely right. This is all about making space. And I think it's also when you start to visualize these things and put them out there, it encourages you to start putting mini goals in place to make them happen. Like it's like, I want to make 6 figures in my business this year. It's like, okay, I've got this goal. It's on my board. It's in my journal. It's everywhere. So how am I going to make that happen? Right. So you actually sit down and you go through the process of like, okay, well, and if I want to make 6 figures this year, I need to get 50 more customers, or I need to find 6 new clients to fill into my client slots on the wall, or, and you start putting actual physical goals in place that are going to make this happen. Because as I said at the beginning of the episode, it's great for your son to imagine that he's going to win the World Series in the bottom of the 9th. That's wonderful. And I hope he does that one day. But at the same time, he still knows he has to go to baseball practice. He still knows he needs to have his time in the batting cage. And as he gets older, if he's still serious about it, he knows he's going to have to eat right, and he's going to have to look after his body, and he's going to have to do all these other things that are involved so that he can actually make that visualization happen. Right. And that is something that we have to recognize too in our businesses with our creativity, is like, we can put these goals out there and we can visualize them, but we still have to do the things to make them actually come to life. Because
you have to do the hard work.
Sitting on the couch watching Netflix is not going to bring your dream to life, unless maybe your dream is to write a Netflix screenplay one day. I don't know. Right?
Even then, at some point we have to stop looking for inspiration and looking
you have to
for, and
write
start
the screenplay.
Executing. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So I think that is kind of a good place to wrap it up. But this was really fun. Thank you so much for coming back this week.
And thank you. And I just want to really say, I congratulate you so much on the episodes. And I know that we started this journey together, and, life happened and changed things up, and I haven't been able to, wasn't able to be a part of most of the work that's been done. But I just want to say, I am so proud of you for your commitment. It's a lot of work to put out 52 podcasts, and I think you should be super proud of that body of work. And there's so many good ones that I really encourage people to go back and take a listen through. That really just, I mean, I just think I'm on it here with you, and I'm taking notes down, like I'm inspired. And so I just so I appreciate you having me back on, and I want to do it again sometime soon.
Oh, you are always welcome to come back, and thank you so much. I mean, to be pretty blunt, I wouldn't have done 52 episodes if you and I hadn't started this together. So, yeah,
Excited.
I'm so happy you came back. And yes, you are welcome back anytime. You know that.
That is awesome. I'm happy to come back. No, this was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you got a little bit of inspiration there on ways that you can work on visualizing and manifesting the things that you want to have happen. And I think that's it for this week, and we will see you all next week.
Well, thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshelookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshelookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshelookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.